Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is B and I am a PADI MSDT or Master Scuba Diver Instructor. Today we are going to be talking about the challenges that you might face on your open water course and how to overcome them. So just a prerequisite, it is perfectly normal to encounter problems on your open water course. Scuba diving or breathing underwater is not a normal thing for humans to do, so do not feel bad about that at all. And there are going to be multiple ways that your instructor can help you overcome these in person. The first one we're going to talk about is equalization. So because we are actually going underwater, we are going to have a lot of water on top of us, which is going to make the air spaces inside our body shrink. So some of the air spaces that we have are our lungs, and we equalize those by just breathing. And that's why the number one rule in PADI is never hold your breath. We also have other air spaces in our sinuses and our ears, and we need to learn how to equalize those. So as you descend, you might feel a bit of discomfort in your ears. There are multiple ways that you can equalize this, and different people prefer different methods. So the first method, which is the most commonly taught, is to plug your nose, close your mouth, and breathe out. So it will look something like this. You should feel your ears flex, and you can do this and practice this above water as well. That is how you would equalize your ears. A few other methods involve moving your jaw or closing your mouth and swallowing. It's similar to how you would equalize your ears if you were going on a plane, so whichever works for you is what you should try first. The second airspace that you might need to equalize is your sinuses. Now, PADI recommends that you do not go diving if you are congested at all, but sometimes you don't know that you're congested because it might just be a light congestion. And the way to equalize your sinuses is to exhale out of your nose, just normally like you are blowing your nose into a tissue. This is going to get rid of any mucus or anything that's trapped in there that is blocking that air from getting out. Remember, it is important to equalize early and often before you feel any discomfort. As you descend, you should make a habit to equalize every few feet. However, if you do begin to feel discomfort, ascend a little bit and try and equalize at a shallower depth. The final airspace that you might need to equalize, which isn't actually part of your body, is your mask. So when you put your mask on, you're going to have an airspace in that mask that helps you to see, obviously. If for whatever reason you feel pressure from your mask, the way you're going to equalize this is you're going to exhale out of your nose. If for whatever reasons any of those don't work, you might have to go and see a doctor and figure out what's going on in your ears, or maybe you might have an infection or a sinus infection or something like that, and you might need to take a break from scuba diving for a few weeks or maybe a month. Alright, so the second one we're going to talk about is buoyancy control, and this is a huge one. This is a really big topic because as a beginner, your buoyancy might not be great, and that is okay because the more you dive, the better you're going to get. But I'm going to give you a few tips which are going to help you out. So buoyancy in general is basically where you don't want to be rising or sinking. You want to be neutrally buoyant in the water column and not going up and down throughout your dive. It also means you're not going to touch marine life and you're going to be aware of where you are in the water column. So the first thing that's going to help you here is your BCD. Being familiar with your BCD and where all your inflate and deflate buttons are, or your dump valves are, is really important, but your instructor should go through that with you on the first day anyway. What you're going to do is you're going to be inflated at the surface, so you're buoyant, and then when your instructor tells you that you're ready to go down, you are going to hold your LPI or your low pressure inflator up and deflate some air out of your BCD until you start to go down. Once you are underwater, again, remember to equalize, you are going to have to add air to your BCD. This is because there's so much water on top of you and so much pressure and weight that it's actually going to be pushing you down. So in order to compensate for that downward force, you're going to add a bit of air to keep you from sinking. Now, when we're adding air, we don't want to hold our button down or add too much because this is just going to power inflate us and send us straight to the surface, which can be very risky and life-threatening. So we do not want to do that. You're just going to add one pump at a time, okay? And very little amounts. Don't add 1, 2, 3. You're going to wait a little bit between adding more air. The idea is that you're not going to be touching the bottom where the sand is, and you're not going to be going to the top. You're just going to be at the same position in the water column. The next thing we're going to talk about is your breathing. So breathing is a huge thing in buoyancy. Your lungs are basically another BCD. And so in order to be good at buoyancy, you should be using your breath. For instance, if I take a really big breath in, I'm going to start to go up because I have filled my lungs with air. However, if I take a really big breath out, I'm actually going to start to go down because I'm actually letting all of that air out of my lungs. So you should have slow, nice, normal breaths. The next thing is weighting. So your instructor will have given you some weight to go scuba diving. This is just dependent on how buoyant you are. Women, we tend to be a little bit more buoyant because we have more fat in our boobs and also our bum. But the more muscle you have, the denser you're going to be and the less weight you will need. If you are underweighted, so you don't have enough weight on you, you're going to find it really, really hard to stay under the water. And you might feel like you're floating off even with an empty BCD. That being said, just make sure your lungs are empty. And if you're overweighted, you're going to have to add loads of air to your BCD to compensate for that extra weight that you've got on you. Normally, as you gain experience and get used to using your breath for your buoyancy, people tend to drop weights. So for instance, I personally started on about 12 pounds and now I can dive on 2, which is a very big extreme. My preference is to dive on 4, but I can dive on 2 if I need to give that £2 weight to someone else. So now we spoke about buoyancy, we're going to talk about mask clearing. So this is one of the skills in the open water course that a lot of people tend to struggle with. The reason for this is because you are used to breathing through your regulator. And so when you take your mask off and your nose is able to be free, people might inhale through their nose. The other reason people struggle with it is because you can't see anything and so you don't really know what's going on. So mask clearing is a really crucial skill in scuba diving because at any point on your dive, you might get a little bit of water in your mask. Also, there is the possibility that your mask could break underwater and you would have to get to the surface. And that's why we do something called a no mask swim as well, but that will be further on in your training once you've already got comfortable with using a mask. So what we do to simulate this is we let a little bit of water into our mask, and how we're going to get rid of this is we're actually going to displace the water that's in the mask by adding air to our mask. So we're going to look up, we're going to put pressure on the top of our mask, and I'm going to do one long exhale through my nose. That will displace the water that's in the mask, pushing it out the bottom, and you will then have no water in your mask. If you ever struggle with the mask clearing, and as I said earlier, lots of people do, so don't feel bad, what I would recommend is having a regulator in, being at the surface with your feet on the ground in shallow water, maybe in a pool or in a bay, and just putting your head in the water and getting used to breathing without having a mask on your face. So really focus on that mouth breathing and not nose breathing. Remember, as with everything in scuba diving, practice makes perfect, but especially with using your mask, the more you do it, the more comfortable you're going to be and the better you're going to be in a situation where you do get water in your mask. The final thing we're going to talk about is fear and anxiety. So this is a really big one in scuba diving because obviously humans were not made to breathe underwater. And so it is completely normal if you do not feel okay on your first go. At the beginning of your course, you might feel a little bit scared. You might feel a little overwhelmed or a little bit anxious, and that's okay. That's why us as instructors are here to help you get through this. So the first thing with overcoming your fear and anxiety is to breathe, okay? Just continuously breathe. You can also close your eyes, hold your hands, and just forget about what you're doing and just take a breath. And that is literally what it is, okay? When you're ready to go back in, whether you're doing skills and confined or you're on a dive, you go open your eyes and you continue on, okay? The other thing is you also have your buddy right there, or an instructor or a dive master. So if you are feeling a little bit anxious, let them know. Hey, I'm feeling a little bit anxious. They might come over, they might have physical contact with you, they might even ask you to breathe with them. Watch their regulator, watch their bubbles, and follow their breath, okay? It's all about calming yourself and anything that you would do on the surface to calm yourself anyway, but underwater. The other thing is building your confidence. The more confident you are in diving, the less anxious you will be. So how can you do this without pushing your limits? The first thing you can do is go into a bay. Somewhere shallow, you're not in any danger, you're not too deep, you're maybe a meter or two, and just swim around at the surface with your regulator on, getting used to it. And then as you gain confidence, you can go to more challenging dive sites and see how you get on there. However, if you are feeling anxious before a dive or you don't know how you're going to react on a dive, please let your buddy or dive master or instructor or whoever you're with know before you go on the dive that, hey, I might be feeling a little bit anxious. I'm not sure how I'm going to be. Just look out for me. That being said, if you do feel really, really anxious and almost nervous about a dive and you're not sure how you're going to react, you maybe should take a breath and not go on the dive. It's always better to be cautious than push your limits. So ultimately, the more you dive, the more comfortable and confident you will become, and the less anxious you will feel. So those are my main tips on what you might feel on your open water course and how to overcome those stresses and factors. But first and foremost, have fun. That is the main point of an open water course or even diving in general. Embrace the learning experience and take small victories when you can. If you pass the mask, celebrate. If you go for your first dive, celebrate. Whatever you do, make sure you're celebrating, make sure you're having fun ultimately. The other thing is, remember, your instructor is there to help you. They are not going to judge you. They are going to help you through the experience, whether you are having trouble with your mask, whether you're feeling anxious, whatever it is, that's literally our job. So lean on them. Do not hesitate to ask questions and seek guidance, whether it's relevant to the course or anything else. We are there to help you through it all. I've said this throughout the whole video, but practice makes perfect. So practice, 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 whether that's a skill that you can't do or whether you're feeling anxious, go in the water, go for a snorkel, go for a swim, whatever it is, the more you practice, the better you're going to be and the more confident you're going to be. Finally, please remember to stay patient with yourself. Scuba diving is not something that everyone gets immediately. It's something that you can work on. And if you are doing this at home with a dive shop, luckily you might have a chance to take a month off or take a few weeks off and go back and try it again. If you're on a vacation where you've only got a week or two, you might feel a bit more pressure, but please don't push yourself. Just take it at your own pace and you'll get there eventually. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to subscribe and I will see you next week.